With brilliant light reflecting off the crystal, the champagne glasses clinked. A Manhattan banquet hall, complete with velvet draperies and gleaming silver platters, hosted my niece's graduation celebration. Jordan, my husband, raised a flute, grinned at the audience, and spoke the lyrics that made my breast swell. Children never. Next month I have surgery scheduled. This is finished. In any case, I own half of the $2 million estate. Uncomfortable at first, then louder. As if it were a great joke, a chuckle echoed over the tables. I gripped the black folder in my lap more tightly, the one that contained bank statements, mortgage documents, and the savings plan we had created together. The folder felt like lead all of a sudden. First came the scorching, raw shock. Then there was silence. Every line in my life was balanced, and every figure was drawn out like a ledger. Tonight a red pen had been cut down the middle by someone. Nobody at the table gave me a look. Jordan savored the cheers as they lifted their glasses in his direction. "Good for you, freedom first," someone murmured, and then there was laughing. In my ears, the sound of glass clinking sounded like claws scraping on porcelain. Despite being in the middle of my own family, I sat by myself. My keys remained intact and shining in the light on the table in front of me. Nobody bothered or inquired about what they opened. To prevent myself from trembling, I pushed the folder against my knee. The city buzzed outside. I was wearing a mask inside. I was courteous, quiet, and nearly smiling, as if nothing were bothering me. The second feeling was to appear to be calm and composed. In recollection, I could hear my own voice, the one that had once mumbled ideas for nursery trips and trust funds for unborn children. The voice has vanished. Jordan drew closer to their pals, instead clinking glasses harder, and laughed louder as my quiet went unnoticed. I was obliterated. They were unaware of the fermenting nature of shame. It doesn't disappear. Like vinegar in a closed container, it becomes sharp. In a moment, I will explain. Click subscribe and let me know where you're viewing from. We must discuss families and finances. The city air felt cooler than usual when I eventually left the dinner hall. Even though Times Square's neon glow was just a few blocks away, I was unaffected by its brightness. The black folder was like a shield under my arm as I moved. I repeated what Jordan had said over and over. It was yelled to the rafters in front of all of our family members and friends, not whispered in secret or discussed in the quiet of our townhouse kitchen. Never have children. Surgery is planned. A decision, not a discussion. The way I drew financial strategies for clients was how we had structured our lives for years. I had an idea, a nursery waiting in the corner room of our townhouse, a mortgage paid off in 15 years, funds that grew slowly, and an inheritance securely placed in a trust. The paint had not yet dried. The little white crib was in a package unopened. Leaning against the wall was a rocking rocker. It's all waiting for a life that Jordan never planned to create. The betrayal intensified when I checked my phone that evening. A brand new tale glistened on Jordan's Instagram, a champagne glass boomerang video with the tagline "Freedom over diapers." Champagne on top of infant bottles. Before I had even hung my coat, thousands of likes flooded in. Colleagues and friends referred to Jordan as brave and iconic, posting heart and fire emojis. I appeared as a ghost at my own party with my face unreadable in the backdrop of the video. It was total humiliation. My personal sorrow had become a catchphrase that went global. I read through the comments till I came across one that really got to me. "Well done, Jordan. Avoid the trap. I was that person. However, the treachery did not stop there. A few days later, I discovered an open email, possibly due to insolence or error, while organizing our shared laptop. "Marry rich, divorce richer" is the topic line. The headline was worse than the words within. Speaking to a friend, Jordan boasted about the timing, how the townhouse was securely half mine now, and how alimony might be used as pressure if things didn't work out. It was a tactic rather than a verbal blunder. As if any abrupt movement would destroy the only hope I had of my marriage, I closed the laptop softly, almost lovingly. The knife became further twisted at Sunday supper with Jordan's family. "You take everything too seriously." Taylor, his mother, who was my mother-in-law in title but never in affection, said as she leaned across the table. "Enjoyment, not accounting, is what life is all about." Jordan flashed a smug, self-assured smile, as though the whole room was cracking a joke that I was too stern to get. "Lighten up," said their brother, laughing. "Not everything can be planned." The taste of roasted chicken turned to ash in my tongue as I nibbled in silence. They were unaware, however, that I had already contacted a lawyer. We saved that email. The Instagram post was archived. All trust papers and mortgage documents were copied and sealed. They believed me to be worthless. They assumed I would be erased and invisible, sitting peacefully in the corner of each table. However, I had already begun to write a different conclusion. I stopped discussing ideas aloud after that Sunday meal. My weapon was silence. On the outside, I continued as if nothing had changed, but on the inside, I started up barriers Jordan couldn't overcome. The lawyer was the first step. The scent of old leather and ink filled the office of a gray-haired guy in Midtown. He only listened as I described his pen tapping softly across the pad. He didn't ask many questions. I passed across the printed email, "Marry wealthy, divorce richer," but he did not respond. He only answered, "We'll build you protection," and nodded. We transferred what was left of my inheritance into a new trust that was solely in my name. After splitting our savings accounts, I moved my share to a different bank. I froze lines. Jordan may try to use reset passwords and canceled credit cards we never used. Jordan had unleashed pandemonium, yet every transaction was measured and exact, leaving a path of order behind. Jordan became noisier at home. As they entertained friends, their voices rising in drunken boasts and glasses clinking, their laughter reverberated around the living room. Over the loudspeaker, I heard Jordan say to a coworker, "PR is power. It's all about spin. I can make Taylor the subject of a headline if this goes wrong." I did not recoil as the word struck me. A little key was chilly in my hand as I moved files into a fireproof box in the kitchen. Another battleground was the art cabinet. It's a big wooden object that I created and constructed myself with several shallow compartments for paintings and prints. My grandfather's ancient carving implements, which were given to me as a youngster and were the sole artifact that felt alive in my hands, were concealed in its base under a covert clasp. Jordan had made fun of it for years as that clunky thing, but now they've decided it's a marital asset worth fighting for. One evening, Jordan replied sharply, "You don't need it. We'll either divide it or sell it. Fair is fair." "It's unfair," I said softly. "It's family." They laughed and said, "Family? You're referring to fraud. Whether you like it or not, I own half of what we created." They were unaware, however, that months prior I had discreetly placed tiny security cameras to give me peace of mind when job required me to be away. More than late-night cab arrivals and garden delivery had been caught on those cameras. They contained discussions, proof and truth-telling that Jordan would have liked to have forgotten. I backed up the files every night. I listened to the tapes every morning. Every digital clip was a nail in our marriage's coffin. Jordan's threats became more audacious. The term alimony, which rolled on their tongues like sugar, became their favorite. "I'll demonstrate to the court your cruelty by leaving me behind. They'll hold you accountable for my suffering." I remained silent. I folded the newspaper, mixed my coffee, and waited for the stillness to pass. Retaliation was developing inside that quiet. December arrived, bringing Jordan's favorite season, arranged pictures, glittering lights, and carefully manicured social media perfection. Each room of the expansive brownstone where their family held the yearly feast was laden with garlands and crystal bowls of sugared fruit. Laughter drifted down the corridors. The black folder was under my arm when I got there. Bank statements, mortgage deeds, trust paperwork, and the email that had destroyed all the illusions were among the many documents that had grown within. I had no intention of revealing it just yet, but I kept it near. Time was of the essence. Small chat and the sound of silver on china marked the start of the supper. Jordan's father then leaned forward in between cutting the turkey and pouring the mulled wine. Over the table, his voice could be heard. "Why don't we make things simpler for everyone, Taylor?" he said. "Turn in your portion of the mortgage. Family members shouldn't quarrel about possessions." As if he were the master of ceremonies, Jordan's hand was smugly resting on his sleeve. Jordan said, "It's easy loud enough for all of the guests to hear. I have the right to half of this townhouse. Why take it to the lawyers? We can all go on if you sign it tonight." The room waited in silence. Everybody looked at me. My fork was cooling next to the uncooked potatoes on the platter. Jordan finally broke the stillness with a voice as harsh as glass, saying, "You're nothing without me." Behind me, the shame was scorching than the blaze. Family members squirmed uneasily, but nobody spoke up for me. Erased at my own table, I was the ghost once more. I carefully put down my fork. "No," I said. The weight of that one word was greater than that of every paper in my folder. Jordan let out a harsh, brittle chuckle. "You believe this is finished. You'll return with a stutter. I have power. I have media buddies. Before the week is out, I may wreck you. Phones buzzed around the table as the words reverberated. Jordan was already starting to leak. False narratives and emails portrayed me as cruel, uncaring, and leaving a vulnerable spouse. Messages flashed on screens. Taylor broke me. Please remember to pray for me. While some nodded and others whispered, the guests scrolled silently. In real time, my reputation was being rewritten. They were unaware, however, that I had concealed a USB drive, a little silver stick no bigger than a finger inside the folder. It included footage of Jordan boasting in our kitchen as clear as day, marry wealthy, divorce wealthier. In one form or another, I will own half of it. I gripped the folder more tightly, allowing the information to sink in. Not this evening. It was not the right time. But shortly. Outside, the snow started to fall steadily and silently. Inside, their victory seemed premature, and I gazed across the table at Jordan's radiant smile. The courtroom was gloomy against a sky, the color of damp stone, and the conflict had just begun. Reporters gripping microphones, their breath hazy in the cold, lined the street in news vehicles. My lawyer was at my side as I ascended the stairs, the black folder resting like steel against my chest. Every step made the metal clasp click. The hearing chamber hummed within. Family members, coworkers, and even complete strangers who had followed Jordan's writings on the internet occupied wooden seats. Even though cameras were prohibited, the intensity seemed to be broadcast. Jordan flourished in that environment. They came in high-end wool, their hair combed to perfection, their eyes glistening with well-timed tears. Whispering to their lawyer, they sat across from me and looked up to meet my gaze. Their mouth curled into a little grin. To the others, they were the noble, frail, and deserted spouse. They seemed like an overly tight mask to me. Order was called by the judge. The papers were shuffled. First to stand was Jordan's attorney, who related a story of unexpected brutality. With a tone brimming with rehearsed indignation, he declared, "My client was blindsided." Taylor left them after they had spent years creating a home together, leaving them with psychological wounds that affect their capacity to work. To aid in our recuperation, we ask for alimony. From the benches came faint gasps. Jordan used a silk handkerchief ideal for the story to wipe their eyes. My lawyer's time came next. Without any drama, he got up and slipped a little packet to the clerk across the table. He stated Exhibits 1 through 3. Financial statements, emails, and screenshots were all included. The judge glanced through them expressionlessly and nodded. But the climax wasn't that. I placed the USB disc on the table at that point, little modest and silver. The judge's eyebrows went up. "What is this?" "Evidence," my attorney replied plainly. On a screen at the front of the room, the video was playing. Unmistakably, Jordan's words dominated the room. "Marry wealthy, divorce wealthier. In one form or another, I will own half of it." Quiet. A murmur of voices followed. Unquestionably, the words weighed heavily. Jordan's face looked exhausted, the rehearsed attitude faltering, and their eyes flashed with dread. Their attorney stumbled, protested, and asked for further details. However, the harm had already been done. Reporters scribbled frantically, and family members shuffled uneasily. Judgment from the audience, not the bench, was electrifying the air. Jordan made an effort to get better. "This is manipulation," they said suddenly, up and pointing at me. "Taylor has always been calculating and aloof. Do you believe this to be proof?" The gavel of the judge struck. "Take a seat." The tone had changed, yet the hearing went on. Now Jordan's cries sounded hollow and hopeless. Next, my attorney produced the trust contract, which had been signed years before, and demonstrated that the estate had always been held in my name, calm, unquestionable, and factual. Jordan's tirade became more irrational. "I even own that cabinet." They yelled abruptly, their voices breaking. "One of the marital assets is the art cabinet Taylor constructed for the townhouse. I desire it." Uncontrolled laughter erupted from the benches. Their last performance's grandeur devolved into ridiculousness. Once derided as cumbersome, that cabinet has become their final battleground. I folded my hands over the black folder and sat still. There were snowflakes drifting outside the courthouse. Inside, the weight of their own words caused Jordan's kingdom of spin to fall apart. The conflict was over. There was no longer any plot for revenge. It was happening. Reporters were still clamoring for my name when the session came to a conclusion shortly before sunset. Unaffected by the frenetic waves, I passed through them like a stone rolling through water. Now my lawyer was carrying the black folder, and I was holding something smaller, the little cabinet key. That bit of brass seemed like solid ground beneath the whirl of microphones and camera flashes. A few minutes later, Jordan left accompanied by two family members and their lawyer. A raw, brittle hatred boiled in place of the facade of sadness Jordan had so readily donned in the morning. The photographers rushed in despite their attempts to cover their faces. A yell went out. What about the video? Any thoughts on the adage, marry rich, divorce rich? Jordan remained silent, their cheeks burning. I arrived at the car before my phone's first alarm. Jordan exposed is now trending number 2. The courtroom audio, along with snippets from Jordan's Instagram account, had already been released by a news organization. The headline was, "Succinct, Harsh, and Irreversible Poetic Justice." My lawyer cleared his throat and gestured for us to go as I continued to gaze at the computer. The townhouse seemed more like disputed territory that night than like home. Everything Jordan intended to claim when the ruling was finalized was in the form of cardboard boxes that were waiting in tidy columns beside the stairway. I listened to the house's breathing as I moved from room to room, turning out the lights. The unopened crib box was still leaning against the wall in the nursery. The brilliant image of a sleeping baby wrapped in pastel linens was muted by a thin coating of dust. I used my fingers to trace the image before taking a step back and softly shutting the door. The art cabinet in the dining room below bore quiet witness to all of our disagreements. I pushed my fingertips over the wooden tools within the secret chamber after unlocking it. Each handle included my grandfather's initials, which had been polished over many years of usage. His workshop smelled of cedar and turpentine, and as he demonstrated to me how grain determines a cut's direction, I could feel the tug of memory. Jordan now referred to that inheritance as marital property. Something fiery ignited inside me at the concept. I took out the cabinet key, put it around my neck, and slid it onto a slender gold chain. I decided to let them sue for this. They'll never realize how valuable it island. The next afternoon, Jordan's breakdown was made public. Despite their pleas for privacy and their claims that the 3-minute video was edited, the internet rarely extends forgiveness. Former coworkers soon came forward with stories about Jordan's brutality. Screenshots of late-night communications were provided by a junior assistant. Spin the numbers. Make it appear as though we gave twice as much. According to a former buddy, Jordan gave tabloids a fabricated tale in exchange for a speedy payment. Jordan was unable to keep up with the overwhelming momentum of revelations that followed one another. In the meantime, notes from strangers flooded my own email inbox. Others recounted their personal tales of betrayal, while others gave comfort. I lost my pension to a husband who thought retirement money was play money, a retired educator wrote. Your composure in court gave me a breath of fresh air. I responded to all of the messages. I understood that the one thing Jordan had never valued was connection. I went back to the townhome for the last walkthrough with an appraiser, 3 days following the hearing. The walkways were still covered in snow, but the tension inside had subsided. The assessor praised my repair of the original crown molding, took measurements of the walls, and took pictures. Until we arrived at the dining room, I nodded while partially listening. An empty rectangle of dust sat there under the picture window. The art cabinet had vanished. My heart pounded. I dashed to the foyer, seeing no evidence of forced entry or footsteps in the fresh snow. Naturally, Jordan had a spare key. They must have sneaked in at night. Bright and deadly rage flashed, then calmed nearly as fast. I decided to let them remove the drawers and wood. I took the tools out of the concealed compartment last night, and it is now empty. It was a hollow box that Jordan had taken. The pivotal moment in the legal case was that theft. Security footage showed Jordan dragging the cabinet, and old photographs attesting to its sentimental significance were sent to my lawyer's emergency request. In order to avoid contempt, the judge ordered that the item be returned within 48 hours. The judge remained unimpressed despite Jordan's lawyer's attempts to compromise. There was a delivery truck on the 40th hour. The cabinet was carefully moved inside by 2 movers who took care not to harm the floor. It had a posted notice on the front that said, "Take your junk." Jay, I nearly chuckled. It was a storyteller's final outburst after their storyline had fallen apart. Jordan's leverage disappeared once the cabinet was given back, and the footage was shown on all the major channels. Their claim for half the townhouse was dismissed, and they were not granted alimony. They were unable to unlatch the iron gate that was the trust document. It was a calm Monday morning when I signed the final decree. The clerk, my lawyer, and a pen that moved smoothly over the paper, no reporters, no relatives. The city outside sounded strangely soft footsteps on damp pavement, distant horns, a bird wailing above the river. I passed a playground on my way home, where kids were chasing each other with their breath clouds while shrieking with winter glee. I stopped and looked at them spinning under the string lights. For a moment I felt a twinge of sorrow. The thought of a nursery in the future made me feel sad. Relief was the next sensation to sink in gentler but no less powerful. Plans change, I thought. Integrity shouldn't. I pressed the key on my throat and continued to move. The edict was just a day old when the headlines changed, but life was still ahead, waiting to be sculpted into something new. The revenge was over. Jordan's company announced a mutual separation in a statement. The unwelcome attention had made shareholders uncomfortable. The absurdity of a public relations professional being undone by their own uncensored remarks made morning talk radio DJs laugh. The radio's gentle hiss filled the now quiet home as I listened while packing boxes. Where furniture had been there were dust lines on the hardwood, leaving empty rooms that had once reverberated with plans for kids and holiday banquets. I wrapped newspaper around framed pictures, each one serving as proof of a story I would never longer tell. The glass of the wedding photo, which had been broken in a previous tumble, went last. I didn't bother trying to fix it. In Jordan's social circles, word spread swiftly. Overnight, the invitations that had been flooding their inbox stopped coming in. A shaky voice rang from a common friend. She said, "Jordan is holding you responsible for everything." I told her the truth. Jordan's own arrogance had released the tape. I had only hit play. "They say you leaked the video." She exhaled, almost appreciative, as the connection became silent. "Taylor, look after yourself." Jordan's apologies, emails came in spurts in the weeks that followed, with grief mixed with threats and pleading mixed with blame. Unread, I archived them. I was able to rebuild in silence since my lawyer took care of all correspondence. On the outskirts of Brooklyn, I discovered a smaller apartment with 2 bedrooms, a tiny yard, and enough sunshine for herbs to grow on the sill. The townhouse would be sold, and the money raised unaffected by Jordan would go toward retirement plans and philanthropic donations that I had put off for too long. With the last frost of winter moving day arrived. In the barren Echo office, friends' voices were pleasant as they assisted with moving boxes. Later, we made a coffee stop. Harold, an older coworker, tapped his mug's rim. He claimed to have seen every bit of the coverage. "You maintained your honor." I thanked him, feeling the reality sink in like a blanket. That counts. My real legacy had been dignity, which was more deeply ingrained than any monetary trust. I unpacked my grandfather's carving tools that evening when I was by myself in the new kitchen. The wooden handles seemed to still recall the shape of his hands since they suited my palm. One by one, I placed them on the counter, teaching them patience, accuracy, and respect for the invisible fibers within a block of wood, with each scratch in the grain telling a tale. At that moment, I understood that retaliation had always been about healing, rather than causing devastation. I took a stroll along the East River Promenade the next Sunday. Shards of late sunshine caught the thin ice that floated down the river. Families passed with their scarves flapping. A small youngster screamed with glee and scurried before his mother. The sight did not hurt for the first time in months. All I could feel was a gentle, growing hope. Life is still kind when we don't compromise our morals for expediency. I made a quick movie at home, talking straight into the camera. I gave a brief synopsis of my situation, being cautious with specifics, but forthright about the price of treachery. Plans may be changed, I decided, but when we lose ourselves, nothing can make up for what we've wasted. I clicked upload and carefully shut down the laptop. Gratitude, empathy, and admissions from strangers who had remained in unbalanced relationships for too long were among the messages that flowed in. Before midnight, I responded to as many of them as I could. Without being bothered by viral posts or courtroom nightmares, sleep came easy. In my visions, I was standing in my grandfather's workshop with high windows letting in light and cedar shavings swirling at my feet. He gave me a sign of approval, and I woke up grinning. The mild rain that came with the early arrival of spring covered the pavements and made every tree tremble with delicate green buds. I let the grain show through my hands while I sanded a tiny block of cherry wood on leisurely Saturdays. Silent, methodical, and devoid of familiar sounds, every chisel stroke felt like a sentence in a new story. Jordan's story dwindled as other controversies took its place. Jordan had left the city and accepted a less prominent position with a tiny firm upstate, according to a link that a buddy emailed. I closed the page after reading about personal setbacks and a desire for privacy. I no longer had to follow certain news. I threw a little housewarming party in April. Coworkers donated handmade pastries, neighbors brought potted herbs, and laughing filled the air as the fragrance of new paint permeated the rooms. We entered the little rear deck at nightfall. For a while, the world seemed to be held together by small miracles such as lamplight, bird music, and the whisper of friends telling stories as a cardinal flared red among young trees. Harold stayed at the door as the evening wore on. "You appear lighter," he said. "Keep at it whatever you're carving." I said I would. On my work table, the partially completed carving was a little memento box rather than furniture. When the box was finished, I would insert the cabinet key inside, turning a source of struggle into a symbol of perseverance. I discovered that the most patient sculptor is time. It removes things that are no longer useful, leaving just strength and shape. For a period, I had lost a husband, a family life plan, and my public image, but I had gained something more subdued clarity. That's more weight than any headline could have. I write these last words tonight for whoever might need them as lamplight gathers on my desk. Remember that blueprints may be redone if treachery has destroyed your plans. It is possible to safeguard assets. The only fortune that is genuinely priceless is your integrity or inner compass. Keep it safe, develop it, follow it home. Comment right to let me know whether you think upholding dignity was the right decision. If you have a better suggestion, please share it here. Money and families will always entangle. It is our responsibility to maintain a clear compass.